talks about how this goes on. Pavan? Pavan, please change the slide. Pavan? Yes, thank you. What becomes pivotal in substantivist thinking is text, which everybody calls text,
We can't
and
see the
oral
slide.
text. You need to understand that technically an oral page or an oral narration is also a text. That's an oral text.
We can't see the
now,
new
how
slide.
big does it have to be? Well, you begin with the sentence. A sentence is already a minimal text. You can't see a slide. Oh, I see. I see it, and other people.
No, I
can't. You have to do something technically. Rajesh can't see the slide.
Yeah, I can't see. It's only still stuck up with that substantivism.
Rajesh says the slide can't be seen by everybody.
We can see that, Prabha.
Oh,
I can't see.
I can see it.
Rajesh,
Sir,
leave the
slide is visible, sir. Yeah.
Leave the thing and come back. Other people can see it apparently, Rajesh.
Yes,
yes.
Yeah, it's visible now.
Can you see, sir, Rajesh?
Where now multiple people want to join.
No, I'm still stuck up with the first slide.
Right now we can't see anything. Right now when multiple people. Now I can see. Can Rajesh see? Rajesh, it might be a problem with your device. Would you like to come out of the call and come
carry on with the discourse? I'll manage it. No, I can't see the slides are not moving in my. I'm using my phone for a change because my wife is teaching on the my computer.
You're using your phone. Okay. Rajesh, would you like to go out of the thing and come back? Or go to
Might
Facebook? Maybe Facebook doing a
problem with
better
your
job.
device because
Rajesh, sometimes
we can
Google
see
Meet doesn't work well on the phone.
Ramakant,
You could
we can
try
see the slides.
another channel like
Okay,
Facebook.
I'll try that.
Yeah, other people can see it, Rajesh. So, yeah. Let's see what you can do, Rajesh. I mean, sometimes refreshing works, but on the phone you can't refresh. It's not a computer, so you can't refresh. Anyway, so to get back to what I was saying, a sentence already a minimal. For bigger text, why are they relevant to grammarians at all? The answer is, you cannot read the minds of others in your speech community. How, therefore, is the knowledge of others expressed? The answer is, you and other people in your community look at the same screen, right? Like what we're doing now. We are looking at the same screen, all of us who are in this meeting. On that screen are projected the widely shared texts of the community. That is the function of literature. I'm not talking about the entire literature of the community. I'm talking about the minimal part of the literature that everybody knows, like the nursery rhymes, like the major oral classics that everybody has heard, like the folk tales. I'm talking about the minimum knowledge that everybody in the community has if they belong to the community at all. I don't mean the complete works of William Shakespeare. I mean easy come, easy go, the proverbs. The proverbs are also literature. Everybody knows the proverbs of the language that they speak in. That sharing of the minimal literature is your approximation to knowing what other community mates share with you. When you speak fluently and write fluently, whether it or not you're taking part in the textual flow because you're generating text. Every sentence you speak or write is a text. It takes part in the textual flow of the community. To understand this, you have to treat language as discourse, not language as a code, not language as merely a mapping sounds to meanings, which has been the usual understanding in grammar. Next slide, please. I'm about to talk about precarious executive. The
slide is visible, sir.
Now, Pawan, next slide. Yeah,
I see. Now I'm scared. Text all the way. So you can see the precarious executive slide?
Yes,
now
sir,
I can
yes.
see it. Now
Yes,
I'm
we
able to see the slide.
can. We
Thank
can.
you. So precarious exactitude becomes salient, drives towards science, troubles us. Now, what is on this screen is a metaphor I'm using. We linguists are a certain kind of sheep. People in the sciences are goats. We want linguistics to be a science, and therefore we want to pretend we are not sheep, that we are goats. That is the basic image here. Grammar is on a sense, you see. We are sheepish in the sense that we are more sheep than goatish. On one side, there is exactitude. Geometry is totally exact. On the other side, geography, which has these coastlines that are all uneven and have these weird shapes that you can't pin down in geometrical terms. I'm calling geography shapish. Linguistics is neither exact like geometry nor shapish like geography, which is totally exact. Linguistics is sheepish. Okay, that's my joke, trying to get you the picture that we are precariously exact. We have a certain degree of exactitude at the heart of grammar, but it is surrounded by geography like inexactitude. It is surrounded by sheepishness. That is what makes us sheepish. Modern grammar in the present period is loudly bleating, making it obvious that we are sheep rather than goats. Unfortunately, we who are modern grammarians would like to be goats. We would like to have goatee beard like I do and say to other scientists, but the scientists don't allow sheep to come in because they want exactitude. Science depends on exactitude. Since we continue to bleat, it gives us away. We keep trying to shut our mouth and hush up the bleating and to observe a mauna vrata and pretend to be ghosts. Time goes on. We are unable to stop it. That really troubles us. Now, my summary in point 2 of the slide is that we don't need horns or goatees. We don't need to pretend to be goats. Let us embrace our sheepishness. Let us embrace the fact that linguistics is not fully exact. It is a precariously exact science because of the nature of language. And may the public give us its blessings. Now you will want to break free of my metaphor. You will not want to speak about goats and sheep. You are bothered by my choice of imagery. So I'll ask Pavan to please go to following, which will switch to imagery. Very happy. Okay, here we are. This slide, as you can see, moves you to another image, that of the land and the sea, which like that of the goats and sheep, I'm sure. Human, which is amphibian, it's like a reptile. Reptiles can manage both on the land and the sea. Human language is okay on the land, where there is literature, which I'm calling saggy, and in the sea, which has no shapes. The sea is shapeless, artless, and spoken. So human language exists both in writing, which I'm calling the land, and in speech, which I'm calling the sea. Now, what are we going to do? Substantivism. We respond to the needs of the science of spoken language, which are indeed scientific needs for hardcore exactitude. We all know that phonetics is an exact science, but now that there is Chomsky generative grammar, we also understand that not only phonetics, but most of what we understand by syntax is also an exact science. That has to be part of our agenda. Substantivism cannot give up on the exactitude of phonetics and syntax. On the other hand, the other part of our agenda is soft core. There are impression-sensitive demands of the part of grammar that looks at literature, usually called traditional grammar. I call it TLE, traditional lexicogrammar, because it is connected to lexicography. It does not work without lexicography. That business, that enterprise is wedded to writing. Grammar started out as the art of good writing. Remember, grammar teaches you how to write, hence the name grammar, grammaticos, and so on. It is wedded to the written art, and therefore to sense both of the micro-linguistics, which is exact, and the macro-linguistics connected to traditional lexicogrammar, we in substantivism look for a Goldilocks solution. Remember the story of the three bears, Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and the baby bear, and Goldilocks finds that one of the beds is too hard, the other bed is too soft, and that of the wee little baby bear is just right. It's the Goldilocks bed, so she lies down there and tries to sleep. So we're looking for that Goldilocks bed, which is neither too hard like exactitude nor too soft like total inexactitude. Many of us think of traditional grammar as a precursor to generative grammar. It doesn't work that way. Traditional grammar has not stopped. It continues to discharge other responsibilities. Today, if there is a question in a court of law that concerns matters of language, the learned judges and other people helping the judges, such as lawyers, will not invite linguists to come and pontificate. They will look up a dictionary. If they invite somebody, they will invite a traditional grammarian who is seen as an authority of language. Traditional lexicography and grammar is viewed by society at large, including its legal system, as having authority over matters of language detail. We linguists are not recognized by society as experts on matters of language detail. In that sense, traditional lexicogrammar is not our precursor, it is our contemporary. We have to understand better what is our relationship to it. We go to the next slide, please, Pavan. The next slide is called The Lie of Land. This is where we are now situated. Traditional lexicography and grammar, TLG, now do exactitude. That is not its business. We who mainstream generative grammar are trying for exactitude. We claim to be the adjunct to TLG, which is seeking exactitude, and therefore we are trying to be a science. In practice, our effort to be a science is held hostage. We accept the status that everybody gives us. People treat us as a little enclave which provides a science-like supplement to traditional lexicogrammar, but people don't recognize our scientific status. You will find that in the public space, nobody recognizes linguists as scientists. I call the public space the agora. Agora is a Greek word for it. People who are afraid of open spaces are said to suffer from agoraphobia. Agora is the open space. I use it as a technical term to denote a public space in which we speak about free speech and freedom of speech being curtailed by an authoritarian state and other issues of that kind. Discourse is situated in the agora. In every country, the pedagogy of children entering the agora gradually is controlled by traditional lexicography and grammar. When children are taught their mother tongue or other languages, the experts who breathe down the necks of language teachers, first language teachers and second language teachers, are traditional grammarians, not linguists. Linguists are given no power over the school system in any society, including the West. This is a basic fact we have. Editorial systems run by publishers, including linguistics publishers, follow the rules of traditional lexicography and grammar. Proofreading follows the rules of TLG. So in that sense, the agora is married to traditional lexicogrammar. Now there is a magical change we've been able to bring about. So we linguists, even though we have no power over society, we have power over traditional grammarians. They're afraid of us. They think that we are very exact and they have to keep up with us. Keeping up with us involves keeping down, because linguists are looking down, you know. We have left the normative language to traditional grammarians, so we look at the subnormative popular forms of speech which the traditional grammarians don't study. So we go and whisper in the ears of people editing the Webster Dictionary in America. You know, nowadays many Americans no longer say nuclear, they say nuclear. They don't know how to say cupola, they say cupolo. They don't say library with two R's, they say library. They don't say February, they say February. So the Webster editor got afraid of not being up to date with contemporary America. They will lose their sales if that happens. What will happen? What will happen? So they're catching down. If you look at the Webster published 10 years ago, you will find that they tell us that you can say nuclear if you want instead of nuclear. You can say Tupelo, you can say library, you can say February. These are also standard English, but there are a few people who decry them. Next slide, please. 7. Webster has been doing this. My next slide is called, here we are, if you don't catch up, the norm will catch down. Traditional lexicogrammar has been under pressure from us linguists. They are trying to make their prescriptions more inclusive, which is one way to come closer to descriptive linguistics. They are anxious to value as acceptable what used to be called raw and unacceptable 100 years ago. They're trying to be and up to date. Traditional lexicographers and grammarians are trying, therefore, to do something impossible. They're trying to give an exact account both of the popular speech, which is in a state of déjà vu. Their hair is pointing in all kinds of directions. They don't their hair. And of the impeccable performances of the top writers and speakers, like the TV anchors and the elocution artists and the other people whose speech and writing is widely admired, the people writing wins Booker prizes and so on. So the same traditional grammar and lexicography is trying to give an account both of the so-called bad language and of the so-called good language. Right now we are watching the Olympics. Imagine that the Olympics are being handled simultaneously with the Special Olympics for the paraplegics and other handicapped people, which are called the Paralympics. Imagine a race where Paralympic runners who suffer from various cerebral illnesses and so on are running the same races as our top runners whose records you're keeping up with. As you know, it is impossible to have an Olympics which does both the top runners and the paraplegics in the same race. Such a race cannot be designed because you would be hard put to decide how the prizes are going to be distributed, what you're aiming for, what will be seen as the goals, etc. So how do you do it in, how does traditional lexicogrammar combine these two completely contradictory goals of keeping up with the champions and catching on with the stragglers and the failures of the normative game? The answer is traditional grammar has no trouble doing it. It's like India. It's just jugaad. Jugaad makes it possible to say thoda sa just kar lena. Everybody can sit next to everybody else. You're eclectic. You combine the past and the low dialects and special glossaries for words in Shakespeare, even if nobody else uses them, and slang and archaic words, everything that you want. It will all be in the dictionary with various labels. There'll be a label SH for Shakespeare. There'll be a label SL for slang. There'll be a label archaic for archaic, arch for archaic sometimes. Nowadays, people like old-fashioned. Traditional lexicogrammar has always been like this. It has always been eclectic. We, exact linguists who have been pushing traditional lexicogrammar into this combination of Olympics and Paralympics, have to struggle to understand how this is done because language is a place of precarious exactitude. Next slide, please. This is our current predicament in the next slide. MGG says we are scientific. We're a supplement to TLG. TLG is all over the place. They're both inexact and exact, but we do the exact part. But we're a pet dog of TLG. We're on a leash and the public ignores us. Look carefully at the picture. Agora is the public, the open public space at the top of the triangle. At the bottom on the left, you have grammars and dictionaries, which represent traditional lexicography and grammar. We all use it. The boxes next to you by us all are the fact that software cannot show my smileys. I have some smiles there to say used by us all. And bottom right, ignored by us all, those boxes show my weepies. I show their faces crying about the fact that poor linguists, our formal linguistic stuff, both the phonetics and the syntax and semantics, is ignored by the public as a whole. Even linguists ignore it. When we do syntax, we ignore the phonetics. When we do phonetics, we ignore the syntax. This is the part of the public too. We do the same ignoring that the whole public does. Since we are a pet dog of traditional lexicographer, Pavan, next slide, please. We are also in the same crisis that they are in. I'm going to show you in recent syntax that there's a similar crisis in the indication of pronunciation. We can't do everything at once, so I will skip pronunciation. In syntactic work, I'll give you examples from and Dutch, English, and Bangla, but I don't have space for everybody, so I'm only showing English and Bangla. English as in Diane Mason, and Bangla as in Ambalika Guha. I was going to take Ambalika's permission to do this, but she's down with COVID. And I tried to, she said, sir, I'm just recovering. I didn't have the Ambalika, can I have your permission to flash your work in front of the CIA login? So I'm doing this without her permission. I hope people won't later tell me that Ambalika was embarrassed. All these authors who are brilliant present-day syntacticians. Joseph Bayer is a friend of mine, Ambalika is a friend of mine, Chef Babis is a new friend I met in Leiden, Diane Masson is the only person I haven't met. We are all doing catching down. Not just catching down words and their pronunciation as in the Webster dictionary, but catching down as in sentences. Diane Masson, with a straight face, writes a whole paper about examples 1 and 2 on the screen from English. The problem is that she hates apples. This is not a man or woman who stutters, who is repeating this because of stammering. This is contemporary casual English. There's a lot of people who say the problem is that she hates apples. If you don't believe me, go watch the TV show Seinfeld. You'll find a lot of people there talking like such as Elaine. The second example from Diane Masson's paper, the fact remains is that people's living standards are being cut. Now, you can't in normative grammar say the fact remains is, but in casual English, sure, you say it all the time in the United States. It's a free country, right? Since it's a free country, you speak freely, right? Like in Bangla, Ambalika, we're using it like casual, looks at what is casual speech. Tomari lal duturi pulamlo. This is casual Bangla in the sense I have searched and searched on Google, even writing on Facebook or on your blog, nobody writes a lal duto shari. I've checked with other words. I've checked by wearing lal to shobuj and neel and shari to dhuti and everything else. People don't write this, even though they say it, provided that lal can be stressed. It comes out as it is these two red saris that you like then, where red is stressed. The point is the adjective never appears in that position sandwiched between the demonstrative and the numeral in Bangla, except when you're being casual and when you're using focal intonation. Now, what are they doing? When they write a Sambalika Guha was doing a PhD and she didn't have the audacity to write the way the established syntacticians can write, but she the same thing, that you're catching down with the data. Super casual speech and writing will be under the same systematic umbrella as standard English, standard Dutch, standard Bangla, etc. When you look at Masson, Barbies, and Bayer, though not Guha, you will find that they describe their work in terms non-prescriptive English, casual Dutch, colloquial German. Next, please, Pavan. I'm calling this a crisis. Sentential catching down, I'm saying, is a crisis. Why am I calling it a crisis? Because there's a tacit maneuver that this move draws attention to, and we're abandoning that maneuver when we catch down. By catching down, we have brought out the fact that ordinary generative syntax is about the standard language. Not all of the standard language, however, not when we are quoting from Shakespeare to make a point with a fish. We have a grammar of standard average prose. That is what we're describing. We treat it as a default baseline. If there's anything fancy, we say, oh, that's a style. We're not interested in style. That is between Chomsky's aspects, 1965, where he says we are not going to do goes into a limbo of stylistics that is not handled by formal linguistics. When you catch down with casual speech, you step out of that default, you step out of being responsible only for standard average prose into a style, into the casual style, and you begin to notice that since 1957, generative syntax has been about that default. When we catch down, we create a crisis because we are stepping out of that default and then all hell can break loose. We may want to do E. Cummings, there's no fear. We're not ready to do that. You can't be exact about that whole range of options. That is why traditional grammar is eclectic, whereas generative syntax is not eclectic. The claim that there is a natural pan-human trait about which generative syntax can wax eloquent is an optical illusion because over 100 years in several major languages, written prose has had this entrenchment of naturalism. As a result, there is a standard average prose that everybody takes for granted, not just linguists, but ordinary users of the language. But if you look a little, if you read Virginia Woolf commenting on prose, you discover that standard average prose is a recent invention of industrial societies. It did not exist even in Elizabethan times, let alone earlier. Prose used to be all over the place. It used to be something laden with a flourish. We got rid of the flourish and claimed to have natural prose only over the last 200 years. It was a specific event in the history of literature. Linguistics is taking a ride on the special event in history. Next slide. Seven. Thank you. Traditional grammar managed its business well because it said we conservative. Our codification, normative codification tells you what is right and what is wrong. Will only to words. Only for words are we going to say these are regular verbs, these are irregular verbs. English used to have teach, taught, and reach, trot, but no longer do people say reach, trot. Now they say reach, etc. These things are handled in traditional grammar and lexicography. Only for words was there a codification. For sentences, traditional grammar used to have a relaxed mode of description. It was eclectic. It would say, yes, there is a basic average norm which shall be taught in school. In India, when we teach that kind of English in school, they use the buzzword Wren and Martin, because Wren and Martin used to be the authors of the standard pedagogic grammars used by school teachers in India for English over half a century. That's one kind of standard average prose. But even Wren and Martin taught you to be tolerant of people like Shakespeare, of Arsha Prayoga. In contrast, mainstream generative grammar codifies not just words but sentences as well. We don't speak of codification in syntax because formalization. We want to apply our systematic formalization not just to words but to sentences. That triggers a crisis today because we are catching down with casual speech. Let us see what form the crisis takes more carefully, which happens in the following slide, please, Pavan. In traditional grammar, there was no crisis and there still is no crisis. Why? because traditional grammar codified only words and idioms. Those were treated as items of the language, purely items of the language. In traditional lexicography and grammar, the sentence falls under the language and under the literature. Under the language, traditional grammar saw the sentence as a structure for which there was a regime of grammatical normativity. Under literature, it counted as a composition, and editors would modulate the normativity regime for this or that, or they would say there is poetic license, you can depart from standard average prose here for the sake of rhythm and rhyme. They would say this is a highfalutin style that a particular prose writer needs. You're translating proofs, you can do this or that. These were modulations of the editoriality when you see the sentence as a composition. At that frontier, the grammatical codification negotiates the terms with the free discourse of the agora, of the open public space. Traditional grammar was interested in service both to the speaker and writer who attentive to codified norms and to editorial practices, and to the listener and the reader who needs to understand more language than she uses. A listener or a reader will be, as a speaker, confined to their own speech. But a listener or a reader must understand the entire community's language as a proper, adequate listener and reader. You have to be able to read and comprehend everybody. So traditional grammar needs to serve both the speaker and the listener, both the writer and the reader. To do this, it had to be eclectic, it remains eclectic because that is the only way to give service to both sides. Next slide tells you why this becomes a problem for generative grammarians. Pavan? Thank you. Generative grammar codified not just words but a sentence, and claim the whole thing is a normalization. We can claim it as a science. How do we do this? We syntacticians, we build a model, and the model includes certain scientific idealization. They say that for every language, we are given a particular grammar as distinct from universal. What does grammar do? It codifies, it formally associates pronunciations with meaning. For all words, it's traditional grammar. And this is the innovation. For all sentences, remember that all sentence in principle is an infinite set. People have always talked about this, the infinite set. We see this only as structures, not compositions, because generative grammar is not accountable to the literature. We place key points in our language particular accounts on the map what is called universal grammar. What is universal grammar? It is mainstream generative grammar's mathematical map of CHL. CHL is computation responsible for human language as a whole. It's a biological characteristic of our species because we claim that human language is species uniform and species specific and rooted in our innate endowment, etc. It's the skin story that you've all heard. We leave all biodependent properties of language or to socio-cultural scholars. Normal linguistics had nothing to say about it. Next slide, please. Why time bomb? What we're doing? We unify word formation, sentence formation, what I'm calling codification of everything. I'm deliberately copying the phrase theory of everything from physics. They call it theory, I'm calling this theory. Modern linguistics copies physics perfectly. If you open a string theory book and compare it, you see that we're doing this consciously. Why is this a time bomb? if you look at words, there is no problem. Traditional grammar used to register rules and exceptions. Beat, seat, seat were used in English past tenses, except. How do we handle this fact with exception rules? We had the idea that the particularization of the lexicon, preemptor upstate, generalizations of grammar. Now that works in morphology, but it doesn't work in the syntax. Why doesn't it work in the syntax? You will see that in the syntax, the exceptional forms don't block the regular forms, which is what happens in the morphology. I will start going quickly now because otherwise we'll run out of time. We'll have no time left. So I'll let you look at this slide quickly, take my word from it. In no syntactic construction do exceptional forms ever block the regular forms, whereas in morphology they do. Next slide, please. 7. Going. So particularization fails in the syntax. How do we handle this? We can patch up and say that those exceptions in the syntax are a matter of discourse. They're outside standard average prose. So when we are strictly doing mainstream syntax, they're not part of our subject matter. Only when Diane Messon or Joseph Meyer or Barika Guha are looking at particular facts about this or that casual style, then we look at them. That's a different language. That's not standard English, standard Dutch, standard German, standard Bangla. If you do this patch up, you are able to say the codification of everything works because you've eliminated the syntactic exception. So you now have exceptions only in the morphology. So you satisfy the particularization and there is no problem. That is a patch up response. Please, Pavan. এখানে আছে না এখানে নেই sorry the next slide has what happens after the patch up. After the patch up, you require technical resources which create a jeopardy for us. Given that particularization doesn't work in syntax and that it works in morphology, there's an asymmetry between morphology and syntax because of which we've done a patch up. To maintain the stability of our codification of everything becomes a big conceptual challenge for every variant of mainstream generative grammar. And of course, it has many variants, as you know. The formal imagination makes models proliferate. Keep going, Pavan. Next slide. I want to rush through the slides because otherwise we can't finish the talk. You've got the main point by now. To resolve these, no, that's too much. Go back, Pavan. You just, Pavan, please go back one slide. Yes, thank you. We are resolving these jeopardies. This is what substantivism does by recasting morphology's terms of reference. How do we do this? We say that, we as linguists, we as mainstream linguists build various intricate methods of coping, which are being episodical differences, my disapproval for them. I will leave those of you who know mainstream linguistics to remember what the epicycle devices are like. In contrast, substantivism, that is the move I'm reporting to you today, we have an extrication strategy from these jeopardies. How do we do it? We claim that the difference between morphology and syntax is fundamental because typical words are specified meaning bearers. In Indian terms, you can call them arthavachakas, whereas typical morphemes, what formalistic linguistics call morphemes, participants as we call them in morphologic processes, they typically bear broad brush impressions other than meaning. They are abhasa dyotakas and not arthavachakas. This is the main point of today's talk, empirical. Let us go to the next slide now. Now I'm ready for the next slide, which is the empirical slide. Dear audience, this is the central slide today, the facts about English and Hindi wala. English which is claimed to be a suffix, an agent suffix by mainstream generative grammarians, you will discover if you go through my data here that you cannot specify a clear distinct family of meanings for English A dishwasher is a device for dishwashing, as is a can opener. A page turner is a book that makes you turn the page. A thriller is a book that thrills you. A farmer or miner is a person who farms, mines, and gets paid for doing so. A boarder or a lodger is a person who lodges who pays to lodge. A diner is neither a person who pays nor a person who is paid. The place where paying happens. A diner is not a device for dining. It is not a person who gets paid for dining. It's not a person who pays to dine. It is a place where some people pay other people to dine. A 49er is a man who goes off mining in California in the 1849 gold rush to try to get some gold. A women's libber is a person, typically a woman, who believes in feminism, disparagingly so labeled by anti-feminists. I won't go through the rest of the list, I'll let you do it, but I defy you to show me a coherent cluster of meanings for if there is a single element If there is no single element generative morphology is a load of rubbish. It is based on a completely faulty assumption, which is that morphemes exist and are similar to words semantically. That is not the case. If you don't want to take the English data, look at the Hindi data. Look at the wala in Shabdi wala, Asman wala, Dene wala, Ye wala, and Konsa wala. And I defy you to put these walas together in a single wala. Next slide, please. This, I'm just giving you more data in case you think one pair of examples is not good enough. I will not go through it for you. Ish and Hindi Sa are identical to the Arval example. Next slide, please. This is the central conceptual move I'm making today after the empirical move I've already told you about. The empirical move is to say words and morphemes are different in principle. Syntax and morphology are different in principle. Syntax deals with words. Syntax therefore deals with complete, specified, meaning-bearing units typically. Morphology deals, if you wish, with morphemes. Substantivists don't do it that way. We use strategies, but we have participants in these strategies, which is similar to morphemes. These carry impressions. Given this, we have made a semiotic turn. How have we made a semiotic turn? By defining criteria, differentiating the subject matter of syntax from that of morphology. How have we done this? We've pointed out that morphology is inexact, whereas syntax is exact. We have designed criteria that delimit what is done in syntax, what is done in morphology. And we have noted that the semiotics of a particular language, called language L, is always in dialogue with the agora where people speak L and write L, the public space of the community where L exists. Consequently, the criteria allow us to pick out the part of our formal pattern account, our formal linguistics, which shall be exact. We claim that the exacts of the particular grammar of language L are rooted in universal grammar. On that score, we completely agree with Chomsky's mainstream generative grammar. We disagree with them when they want to use the same account to cover sex and morphology. We're claiming that morphology has more to do with the inexact flesh and blood of the language and with the community and is accountable to discourse, not through exact meaning components, but through inexact impression components which add up to a meaningful word. This is where semiotics does specific technical work for us by differentiating the exact technical bit from the bit that is inexact for equally technical reasons that are rooted in semiotics and not in formal linguistics. Semiotics delimits the bit about formal linguistics that can be exact and gives us the fence where morphology sits, with one foot swinging on the exact side and the other foot swinging on the discourse side. Next slide, please. Perfect.
It.
This is the part of substantivism which verges on socio-political commentary. An older child, in practice, most older children in at least middle class families and so on, where you can observe them in the milieu in which most academic work happens. Older children apply the adult criteria that they are learning very, very rigorously and stringently. And they critique their parents and their grandparents and their teachers from the perspective of an ideal citizen of the society. And that's why teenagers tend to be idealistic. That's the empirical fact. Now, we in substantivism think about the idealized older child, whom we counterpose to the figure of the idealized very young child in the Chomskyan idealization. We imagine that the idealized older child, whose capacities as usual are blown out of proportion for the idealization, such a person seeks to expose the fact that the priorities of her society are indefensible. Which priorities? The ones embodied in the semantic defaults of the society, for example, the masculine default and so on. From the viewpoint of pan-human rationality, and as a substantivist, we are imagining a pan-human rationality embedded in the brain of the prototypical idealized older child, who is critiquing not just the adults from the viewpoint of society's rationality, but critiquing the society from the viewpoint of humanity as a whole, of pan-human rationality, which is rooted in not just universal grammar, but universal morality, the other universal principles that are available in the human brain on the basis of which we function at the ideal level. As a consequence, linguistics, that is to say exact gender linguistics, cannot morally be on the same page as traditional grammar. Traditional grammar defends the established order, ladies and gentlemen. Generative linguistics has to be critical. It represents the pan-human rationality which is never fully realized in any given society, because given societies are always run by bad people. Every society throughout history has always been run by bad people. Linguistics is about stopping this, which makes linguistics utopian. Substantivism is the brand of linguistics that defiantly says that linguistics has the duty to be utopian. Mainstream generative grammar represents the compromise between the political idealist Noam Chomsky and the pragmatic teacher and business person Noam Chomsky, who has to deal with his colleagues in MIT and Arizona and keep his friendships with right-wing people so that they can do linguistics together. Chomsky is both an idealist and a pragmatist. It is as an idealist that I practically worship Chomsky. As a pragmatist, I understand his decisions, but I don't think he is able to tell the truth about language because he tied down by these friendships. My solution, as most of you know, has been to lose all my friends. Aisha Kidwai has unfriended me on Facebook. I take this because I find it important to put the idealization online politically and take all the consequences. I joke that substantivists hold their annual conference in a telephone booth because there are roughly 3 substantivists in the world, and that is how we hold our annual conferences. Last slide, Ravan, please. Last slide. Yeah. We agree with traditional grammar. The language is based on writing. It is centered on writing. It denounces the center as illegitimate as the result of the entrenched, interests of the big business groups and other cronies who run the society for them. Substantivist linguistics therefore intervenes by trying to counter-writing. Where does the counter-writing come from? It comes from pan-rationality. What does it do? It's critical. Who is it critical of? The established order in each society. From this perspective, we update anti-prescriptivist linguistics, which has been the mandate of linguistics from the 2nd of February 1786, when linguistics was first established in Calcutta by William Jones. So I see linguistics as being capable of making a contribution to democratic discourse here and now, a contribution to resisting authoritarianism. I'm claiming that substantivism is the conscience keeper of linguistics. It is the Socrates, and at a symbolic level, it is put to death. Death takes the form that nobody reads substantivist writing unless you happen to be in this tiny telephone booth where we hold our annual conferences. That is why when I give a talk, I have to make compromises. But Umarani and Shailendra put me on a spot by asking me to speak at a CIL forum. CIL, in the form of D.P. Patnaik, has been with me from the age of 5. When I'm speaking at CIL, unfortunately, I cannot tell the usual semi-untruths that I tell to manage my friendships at a socially acceptable level. Here I have to tell the truth and face the brickbats that are going to come my way because I'm telling the truth. Generative grammar has compromised its principles to be able to survive in the real world, and as a result, thousands of boys and girls have grown up being generative grammarians. The compromise has been essential for survival. It is like when we are asked to try to understand why Stalin had to sign a pact with Hitler so that the Soviet Union survives and is able to fight back when it is time to fight back. Maybe that is the right reading of Stalin. I'm saying that is the right reading of generative grammar. Generative grammar has made a compromise with the established order in the society that we inhabit, so that linguists who use generative grammar can grow up and have careers and get jobs and go around their business without being arrested or killed or shunned by all their friends. The last being a description of my case. You know who I'm talking about when I say arrested. It's a question of which your priorities are going to be. There are different priorities for different people, and I have chosen to stick to my principles, even if it means that I will not get the kinds of students I might have got, that I will not keep the friendship. But I seem to find that many people who disown me in public secretly read my writings when other people are not looking. And that maybe some of these words do have an influence. So thank you for your attention, but I don't expect any of you to publicly agree with a word of what I'm saying. Thanks. That's the end of my talk. Questions, please.
Thank you so much, sir, for the very illuminating and enlightening talk on such an important, huge, and so rarely discussed topic, ranging from micro to macro grammar, traditional to modern linguistics, and very particularly on substantivist linguistics. Now, sir, with your kind permission, we would like to open up the presentation for a discussion, and we invite the esteemed audience to interact and discuss with the respected speaker. Thank you.
Can I come here?
Please, sir. Please come, sir.
Excuse me, actually, after listening to this lecture, I feel more to convey my gratitude to my teacher who had guided us. And to what extent we have become a student, I do not know. But after listening to this lecture, I found now it is just a reality check. Whatever we do in linguistics, if we come to traditional grammar, we find more facts than just what linguistics says. And this code to discourse, I feel it appears to me as if it is just Panini gave the code, the whole tradition, Patanjali till Bhartrihari, is just a form of discourse to analyze and decode the whole meaning of Panini Sutras which have been written in 5th century BC. This is my feeling that we are just code switching. And once we decode it, I think we can learn a lot about our Indian knowledge system. That will be a great help for young scholars as well as us, because we know linguistics, but we do not understand our own language structures. So many times people just argue whether it is there or not. But unless we know our traditional grammar, we will not be able to keep up the space between the tradition and the linguistics, the modern. So that I feel that this is something what I understand only, that this is a sort of code switching from Panini to even up to what is the 18th century. We find that it is only a discourse that brings the language to make understand what Panini taught in 5th century. That is all my understanding. Thank you.
Similarly, I quite agree with you. In fact, our whole effort has been to implement Bhartrihari. My own knowledge of Bhartrihari is limited, but Rajendra Singh, my late friend who passed away in 2012, Rajendra Singh had read the entire Vakyapadiyam lots of times, minutely, every single shloka very carefully. And much of the implementation we use in substantivism is due to Bhartrihari, filtered through Rajendra Singh's understanding.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So, I mean, you're on the same page as I am. I mean, we are trying to do Bhartrihari for discourse and Panini for grammar and put the two together in one way of handling all this.
Yes.
That's how our criteria work. We use Panini for some purposes and Bhartrihari for other purposes.
Yes,
and we
sir.
use Bhartrihari as our guidance to decide where to use Bhartrihari's innovations and where to use Panini.
Yes, yes.
Patanjali is in the middle. Patanjali is where you see Panini on one side and Bhartrihari on the other side. Patanjali is sort of the center.
Yes, sir.
The Mahabharata is the central document.
Yes, sir.
So from it, on the one hand you have Ashtadhyayi, on the other hand you have Vakyapadiyam.
Yes, sir.
But
Thank
I didn't want to say this in the talk because you know the Sanskrit tradition. Many people in today's audience don't know it, so they wouldn't understand.
Yes.
So I tried to use our present data, but you will forgive me for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I learned a lot from you also while you were there. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, sir.
Hi,
I would
Akansha.
like Hello. I would like to know if there is any difference between semiotic approach to language and a substantive approach to language, or are they synonymous?
We in substantivism use semiotic in a highly particular way. We don't put semiotics first, we put the grammar first. And we tell the semiotics to give us criteria for deciding where to be strict about some parts of the grammar, where to be relaxed, how to handle different generic modes, how to handle certain kinds of literature like E. Cummings, how to handle casual speech, how to handle babies. That kind of stuff is all done by the semiotics, which handles the framing of our different degrees of exactitude and inexactitude. So for us, semiotics is a regulatory scaffolding around the building of grammar, whereas there are other people for whom semiotics is the whole thing. They take a semiotic approach to language. For example, you must be thinking of Professor Kelkar, who was my guru. Now, Kelkar had the same basic impression of the mandate of linguistics, which he taught to me, namely that linguistics has to be a bridge builder between the exact studies and the inexact studies. But Kelkar's understanding was that semiotics itself has to be the foundation.
Okay.
That you have to see grammar as an application of semiotics. We in substantivism don't think so. We agree with Chomsky some aspects of grammar, for example, things are probably innate, and even if they're not innate, they're non-negotiable. They're part of what it is to be human, whatever reason, probably biological. And that this cannot be attributed to semiotics. Semiotics in substantivism is a more general purpose fact about the architecture of the entire human brain, not of the language faculty per se. Semiotics also decides how you turn when you're crossing another person on the street. There's a paper written by the 1990s that I often refer to about this passive behavior. That's not language, but it's semiotics. So for us, semiotics and grammar have a oblique relationship, for which a main modern inspiration is from Nicolas Rivet, French linguist of Belgian origin. I think in origin, I could be wrong about it. Nicolas was the person at the University of Paris, campus number 8, who invited Richard Kane from America to come and teach in Paris. So Nicolas, in that sense, is the father of modern European generative grammar, because Kane produced all this thing about starting with Ritzi and so on. So Nicolas created the architecture of connection between grammar and semiotics that we follow in substantivism. I have extended it to phonology as well, thus slightly improving on the things part of the model. So Kelkar gave me the basic inspiration of taking Jacobson completely seriously and seeing in what ways we can update Jacobson today. The Panini to Bhattacharya tradition gave Rajendra Singh the initial tools with which to create part of the architecture. Nicolas Rivet and Ray Doherty and Kate Vitilius gave me the tools for the syntactic part of the architecture vis-a-vis semiotics. And what we have today is a package of all these things filtered through dissertations that have been written over the past years. 3 of my students who have written brilliant dissertations, Nivedita Mitro, Debaroti Jana, and Praveen Singh. So much of what I'm reporting today is the result of the work of Nivedita Mitro, Debaroti Jana, and Praveen Singh, not my own work. But I'm taking the credit. This being India, we seniors always take the credit of the work done by juniors. So I'm seeing their credit as usual. We're all crooks, right?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It was nice listening to you. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Akash. Good to have you here. I'm not reading the chat, but he's putting comments there expecting me to answer. I'm not reading it. Anybody has a question? I'm listening only. Please tell me. Please come up to the screen and tell me. I hope there's nothing hidden in that I need to read. I'm not on that screen now. Indra, is anything coming on chat? Are people asking questions?
Not yet, sir. So may we
No questions.
request
Fine.
professors? Yeah, yeah. Like we would like to invite Professor Agnihotri to join the discussion if there is anything that we can discuss.
Gopabandhu Mohanty wants to ask a question apparently. There's a thing on the screen saying Gopabandhu Mohanty raised his hand.
Yeah, as you can see,
If that's on purpose, maybe he wants to say something.
So, yeah.
Yeah, Agnihotri first
can
perhaps,
you,
Ramakant. If not Gopathan, Ramakant.
Yeah, I'm there.
Ramakant, you want to
I'm
say
there. I am listening to Prabal, and I have said in
If
the
you want to ask
chat,
or say something.
grateful as ever.
Okay. Thank you.
No, you see, I
Thank you. I'm
thought
watching the chat,
if it were possible to sort of, define a little more or more clearly the division of labor between syntax and semantics, in sort of more clearer terms. And I think the whole idea of the public space, I think linguists have been ignoring. This something that I have been talking about in terms of the formal and the variable end of language, and in between the public space. Yes. So I thought if you could elaborate that a little more, it will help people, without getting into a lot of technical terms, as it were. Thanks.
Yeah, I've got a chapter which does that. This chapter is coming out as soon as Geeta and Rennie are able to shepherd all the other chapters into place for their book, Mapping Academia. They have a book about multiple disciplines, including chemistry and literature and philosophy. And I just do the linguistics chapter. And everybody who's read it told me that the chapter is user-friendly, that ordinary people can read it without knowing any linguistics and so on. So maybe that is the answer to what you're saying, because it certainly addresses the thing you're talking about, with lots of examples and details, without flooding people with technical terms. Geeta understood it. Geeta teaches sociology at Mumbai University. So if she understood it without knowing a word of linguistics, then I'm sure it is reaching people. So your questions have been answered. I can't do it in this talk. There's no short answer to that question.
Thank you.
I'll refer people to this book, Rama. Yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, we've been learning from you throughout. Your interventions have been very important in the public space. You're practically the only linguist in India who writes in the public space, Rama. You represent the field there, which is a pity. I wish more of us wrote in the public space, but some of us are government servants and aren't allowed to write, and so on. There are these difficulties. CIL, for example, anybody at CIL is debarred from writing there because you're government servants. Government servants can't write in the public space. It's against the service rules, right? Which is a pity. That is how things are.
I think I would let others, because I can always talk to you on email in more detail.
Okay,
so raise the questions, So yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for making the talk. I'm grateful for your position.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Agnihotri. So now can we invite Professor Mohanty to raise your query, please?
Gopabandhu, you had a question?
Please unmute, sir. Please unmute your mic.
Mohanty sir, you are mute. Yeah. No, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. I think it will be a good idea if you write in the chat box. Something is wrong with the mic.
Yes, sir. Yeah, something is wrong with him.
No, but now we can hear.
You can hear Gopabandhu? I can't hear him. I can't hear Gopabandhu at all. And on my screen, I can't see him, so I didn't know if he was trying to talk. Maybe he should write in the chat box then. Alindra can tell me what is in the chat box.
Yes, sir. I think we can take another query from
Take a query
other
from
people.
anybody else.
Yeah, if yeah.
Meanwhile, Gopabandhu might write in the chat box.
Yes, he can write.
Yes.
Actually, he is
Yeah.
visible,
His
but
mic is
his
not
voice
functioning.
is not audible.
His mic is not functioning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Other people?
Excuse me, sir. Can I ask one question?
Yeah,
Please, sir.
please do.
Yeah.
I'll show my face also.
Okay, hi.
I just want to know the amphibian aspect you mentioned. I just want more clarification on that. Does it have anything to do with
Which aspect? I didn't get you.
with the language? Amphibian character.
Amphibian, okay. Language is both on the land of literature and in the sea of speech. The language being in speech and on the land of literature, it means that because it is in speech, and you can have an exact science of the phonetics of speech and an exact science of the way the syntax of speech works. As a result, you can have an exact linguistics. There is a component to linguistics which can be as exact as any rigorous hard natural science. That is in the sea, and paradoxically, the sea looks formless to us. That is where the form of language is actually situated. On the land, as we are calling literature, we're calling it craggy because literature is heterogeneous. There are different styles of literature, different periods coalesce. Literature retains the past. Past masterpieces are retained in the archive of literature, so people keep reading earlier writings in earlier forms of the language. As a result, literature becomes very heterogeneous and complicated. Language is amphibian in the sense that it goes both with this sea and with this land. The sea makes the exact science possible, and the land forces linguistics to have an inexact component that makes an interface with literature and discourse. That is what I'm talking about. That's why I said amphibian. Like a reptile is amphibian. Yeah, that's
thank you. I know it is nothing to do with the developmental aspect. It is nothing with the evolutionary.
No, it is not about the development. No. Yeah. It's not about history. Not about history.
Why I asked this question is that because the studies on dementia of late, where the word loss or semantic component, which is semantic aphasia, the studies are done on the fish.
The fish. I see. Okay.
They are using the fish brain to study the.
I'll have to look up dimension, the fish brain, to understand this better. Thank you. Thank you for pointing me that.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I think there is no any more question. Query. Yeah. So
it's also time to finish, I suppose.
Yeah. We thank all the I think someone has sent a very.
Uma wanted to speak. Uma has her hand up.
Okay. Well, we thank all the esteemed audience joined us in the presentation, discussion, and interaction. It's really a privilege for me to moderate this very important lecture. I thank the Institute for giving me the opportunity.
Alindra, Umarani has a question, Alindra. Umarani has a question, she says.
Okay, I will hand over the mic to her.
Give the mic to Umarani.
So, yeah. So, once again, I thank Professor Das Gupta for his wonderful and impressive talk on behalf of the Institute. Now, I hand over the mic to Professor Umarani, Madam. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alindra. I had a question. So anyway, thank you. Let me ask my question first. Yeah, so it was a wonderful talk, Professor Das Gupta. It was always a pleasure to listen to you. I mean, it's a very heavy topic for many in the audience, including me. But nevertheless, I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One is related, you were talking about the way how one would like to specify the operational details, especially in substantivism. You're saying operational details are less important than the division of the labor. Let me show my video also. So I wanted to just ask you, like, you also mentioned that one has to specify full semantics or some semantics for full words. I was wondering, is there anything devised by this group on substantivist ontology? When you're talking about semantics, do you have anything to say about that? Natural language ontology, how would you go about it with this?
Every part of substantivism is the result of a few people doing very hard work for decades. Like our phonology came mainly from Ford, our morphology came mainly from Singh, our syntax came mainly from yours truly, and so on. So different people have done different things. There was a friend of Rajendra Singh's who lives in Germany, who 3 decades ago had promised to develop a semantics for us. Then he left us. He left the telephone booth. He stopped being a substantivist. As a result, our semantics has remained a promise. We have some hopes about it. You will find a few remarks in after etymology. They're not very good. But it's mainly because a German friend whom I shall not name, who has not been named today, did not give us the help that Rajendra Singh was hoping for. As a consequence, alas, we do not have a semantic. If you look at my chapter, I can send it to you, the chapter coming out in Geeta and Reni's book. The chapter has an exact specification of what we're expecting our semantics person to deliver. But that, of course, doesn't deliver it because we are not doing semantics ourselves. We don't have the expertise. So, no, I can't answer your question because the semantics wing will have to be developed by somebody doing hard work for several decades, just as every other wing has been developed by hard work for several decades. We do the work first and talk later. So substantivism, depends on the work, and this work has not been done. So we don't have
thank you.
Yeah, sorry about this.
Thank you. Of course, it would be wonderful to see what distinction you would have with regard to lexical semantics versus formal semantics,
Obviously.
since you know the divisions. And it will be nice to see. Maybe we will wait for the day you guys come out with something. Thank you so
I
much.
hope we find somebody. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Uma. It was your problem. My pleasure.
Wonderful. Well, I must tell the audience here, like Professor Das Gupta is one person whom we always count upon for anything to do with academics. When we approached him to deliver a talk in this series, he not only accepted the invitation, but very quickly sent his slides to us, which was very impressive. So I really thank you for being always interested in doing academics and always accepting our invitations from CIL. I don't think you have ever turned any invitation to us. I wish we could have you in person also some other time. Thank you so much for taking time off from your busy schedule and for being with us and for enlightening us into this new area of research for many of us. This has been opening new avenues for future work. On behalf of the CIL and on behalf of the audience here, I once again thank you for being with us today. Thank you, Prabal.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everybody else. Thank you, Shailendra. Thank you, Alindra. Thank you, Pavan.
Namaskar, sir.
And
Namaskar. Thank you very much for having me.
Alindra Brahma for moderating this. Yes, and for everyone for being with us today. Thank you.
Thanks to the audience.
Thank you.
Bye. See you some other time under more propitious skies when the virus goes away. I'm sure we can all meet up in person.
Yes, of course. Please stay safe. Yeah, please stay safe.
We look forward to
Thank
that
you,
time.
sir.
Yes,
Take
stay
care.
safe, everybody. All the best. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Srikumar. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Or googling to them. ಸೊ ಅದಾಯ್ತಲ್ಲ
ಅದೇ ನಿಮ್ ಫೇಸ್ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಆನ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳಿ ಬಂದೆ
ವಿಡಿಯೋಗೆ ಆನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ.